Hi, all. I'm Damana Madden. Today I'm talking to you about building highly productive software teams. This is a cut down version of a 1 hour talk I usually give that talks about how I build effective software teams that deliver software on time with quality and are happy functioning teams. So today's agenda will be, first of all, me introducing myself. And then I'll go on to making your leaders, which is where all good teams come from and they must start from. Then making your teams once you have those leaders, and then making yourself uncomfortable, which is one thing you will do when you build diverse, effective teams. So let's start with who I am and why you might want to listen to me on this topic. Like I said, my name is Damana Madden. I have been a software engineer for 23 years since I graduated with a computer science degree. And I have worked on designing, building, consulting, mentoring, and talking to people about software a lot. As you'll see on the next slide, I have worked for 2 big tech companies that I'll mention now. The last 6 years I spent at Amazon, running teams of teams, working in payments, but then also working for Amazon Publishing, which is a big part of the Kindle Books organization. So my job was to get all the books that were published, and new books especially, by Amazon, and drive demand for them. So I worked as a single-threaded owner, building teams of product owners and software engineers, working with operations and production to make sure that anything published by Amazon Publishing got out there and was seen by readers. So that involved making teams from scratch, and also working with the teams that were there, and then working across Amazon with many digital and retail teams. Before that, I was a dev lead for Microsoft across Asia Pacific. So I spent a lot of time flying around and talking to Microsoft's top 30 customers, premier customers, and helping them build software using Microsoft technologies, or using Microsoft technologies with other things. So I've worked as a lead a lot. I'm mainly known for the biometric space. So I've built voice authentication for Australian citizens, vision tracking, smart gates for immigration, when people walk in and out of the country, and other systems like that. I've done a lot of security architecture. Like I said, I've worked for banks and payments, a lot of federal government. I'm also known for having great hair. Now, I do say I am Damana Madden. I'm a recovering workaholic, and that means that right now I'm semi-retired. What that really means for me right now is working on my biggest passions, which are helping women, not just in tech, but making the world better for women, and working in green energy. So that's where I'm focusing on right now. And I'm doing a lot of coaching, design, systems engineering, and software engineering in that space. So that's me. Let's go straight into this talk. The first place I'm going to start is with how you make your leaders. So making leaders is the first thing you should do. Hiring a team and hoping that it will form organically is never going to work. It's never going to work. You can have the best intentions, but everything must be done deliberately. And I'm an engineer. So my idea is that you get something, you articulate it, and you do it rigorously. And making leaders is not about making bosses. It's not about making managers. It's leaders over commanders. And then that's why I start with 3 big areas. Servant leadership, which is an idea out of the 70s. It's not new. I'm not going to over-explain it because most people use it and know it. The Moana test, which is my test for good teams, being the Disney princess you want to see in the world. And then from vision to plate, which is like from farm to table when you're cooking. So let's go to servant leadership. Since most people do know servant leadership, we talk about the idea that people are here, managers are here, and leaders are here, not for themselves. They're here to help other people. They're here to make the team work better, to enable them, to remove their blockers. So I look for key things when I'm talking to my leaders. I don't want them to be there because they want power or because they think that if they run the world, they'll do it better. I think that what I want to hear from them are things like, I work with you, you don't work for me. And I even say that to my managers. I say, I don't work for you. I work with you, and enable me. Let me do what I do best. Get out of my way, remove things from my way, and let me do that. And that's one thing I want to hear from my managers and my leaders. The other thing is I want to remove, like I said before, anything that's blocking you. Just let you do your job. You shouldn't be your individual contributors, who are people who are not managers. They're not managing people or businesses. They are there to be specialized, be engineers, be product managers, design the product, design the UI, all that kind of stuff, implement things. They do not need to deal with all the other noise that comes around it. My job and my leaders' jobs is to get as much of that out of the way, resolve issues, and also resolve ambiguity. And the other thing is that building safety onto teams. So anything that you can break, we can fix. So I say this to everybody. I even said it to my mum many years ago when she was scared of her new laptop. And she was like, oh, but what if I press this and this happens? And I thought, Mum, it doesn't matter. Anything that you can break, I can fix for you. It'll be fine. And I carry that through to my teams as well. And so that says that you can break it, we can fix it. We're a team. And that builds safety. So that's servant leadership. And I only want servant leaders. I want people who want to get the coffee and have the humility to do that, and don't make everything about themselves. So let's see if I can go to the next slide. Now, this is my test for a good team. I call it the Moana test. And the reason I call it that was because I used to watch a lot of Disney movies, like every little girl does. And I didn't really relate to Snow White and her high-pitched voice. And I didn't really relate to Pocahontas. I didn't quite get that background. I did like Belle. Belle from Beauty and the Beast was good. You know, that line, there must be more than this provincial life. That always appealed to me, but that's because I grew up in a very small city. But still didn't appeal to me. I didn't quite get it. And then one day I saw Moana. Yes, I was a grown woman over 40. And I saw it and I thought, that's my princess. She looked like me, and she had family like me, and she ate the same kind of food as me. So I totally related to that. And so the Moana test for me is, can you look out there in the world and see other people that look like you? And kids need that, and young engineers need that, and us older engineers need that as well. So I always ask myself these 3 questions. And those questions are, do your software teams look like your customers? So that's the most important one. And the reason that's important is, if you have a team of just white guys in America building stuff, then you're going to get products that they understand how to use, things that are for them, things that they see. And it's not because they're not inclusive. It's just because that's how they see the world. So you need these diverse teams. I'm not going to try to sell diversity to you guys. I'm pretty sure you understand that concept already. But the way I do it is by asking that question. Do I look like my customers, and do my customers look like my teams? And when you go and you internationalize software and then you localize it, you want to know that Americans don't like the letter U, but the rest of the world kind of does. And other people use other measurements, and there are different currencies. And, you know, nobody's going to talk about a shopping cart in Australia. They're going to talk about a basket. And so these kinds of things matter. And you wouldn't know that if you didn't have your token Aussie on the team. So the other thing I ask is, does everyone on the team have someone that shares a minority characteristic with them? So when you walk onto a team and you're the only person there that looks like you, or sounds like you, or thinks like you, it can be uncomfortable. So I always check that if there is one woman, at least there's another woman. If there is someone from the LGBTQ community, then, you know, they've got somebody else there that they can relate to. If there is somebody, a person of color, there is. If there is, you know, a straight American woman, that there are other people like her in the room. So something that you share together. That's the second part of my test. But the really, really important one, and why this is under leaders and not under teams, is that your leaders have to reflect the team. You have to look around and say, is there a leader out there? Is there a manager, a VP, a founder, an owner, somebody who's up there that people listen to that looks like me? And that's really important. You have to understand that there is that person that exists, because then it tells you there is a path to that role. And you should be able to ask that there is a path to that role. So that's my Moana test. If I can answer yes to all of those, then I have passed the test. My team has passed the test. I ask people when they're looking for teams to ask these questions for themselves. So that's my one test. Let's go to the next slide. So everyone would have seen this cartoon in this comic, I'm hoping anyway. It's been around forever, I think my entire career. And what it demonstrates is what the different roles will see, what the customer wants. They want a tire swing, what they get built in the end, which is, you know, a plank of wood with some rope hanging on the ground, and how we get to that point. So I talk from vision to plate. And what it is that no matter what you think you are building as a business owner or a product owner, you will find that engineers are going to build whatever they want in the end. Now, they're not doing that because they're jerks. By default, engineers aren't usually jerks. They're doing it because they're going to interpret it in their way. And engineers are very close to the coalface. They are about implementation. They're about delivery. They're about listening, hearing, executing. And what that means is that you use these ideas like communication. I talk to my engineering leads and I tell them what I want. They take that interpretation and they give it to the next person who interprets it again. Then implementation happens. And then you come in to confirm it and you think, wait, what? Why don't I have a tire swing? And the reason you don't is because you've got these people who see the world possibly differently to you, and they've built it that way. And so what I say is there's three really very, very useful ways that you can get teams to work properly. And leaders are the ones that get this to happen. And it's through participation. So engineers and leaders participating at all points in the conversation. So when the vision comes up, explain the vision to your team of engineers. Have them sit there from the start with the idea that was in your head before it becomes anything else. They might ask you interesting questions. They might see where you're coming from. They might understand what drives you. Those things build consensus and buy-in and the same product. The other thing is iteration. Come back multiple times and check. The same way they should participate, you should go and participate with a software team. You should always be in there saying, so what are you doing now? Can you show me this thing? Can I get a regular demo of this? That's very, very useful. And the other thing is safety. If something is wrong, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean that anyone should be punished for it, or that anyone's failed. And if it is a failure is not a bad thing, because you're correcting fast, you're changing tack. So those are the three things I always say on both sides, from tech leaders and from business leaders. Participate, iterate, and make sure you keep the place safe so that people want to tell you what's happening. Okay, so let's leave the leadership part, okay, and go to the next slide. And this is about making teams. So once you've got your leaders and you think you've selected people who want to do things for other people, then you've got to work out how you make your teams. So I've broken this into several parts as well. And I am an ex-Amazonian, so I will talk about two pizza teams. I'll talk about the idea that we want no more failing up. But I'm also going to talk about ignoring technology choices when you're hiring teams. So go to two pizza teams. So if we're two pizza teams, it's a term that came out of Amazon. And it's something that Jeff Bezos said. He said that every internal team should be small enough that it can be fed with two pizzas. Now, that's simplistic. But what it means is that you break down the teams into smaller parts. So a lot of the time people say, hey, I've got a team of 20 and I'm going to throw 20 people at 20 pieces of work and it'll take one day. That's not how it works. Resources don't work that way, and people don't work that way. There's that great line that if it takes 9 months for a woman to have a baby and you give her 8 other women, it still takes a woman 9 months to have a baby. So sometimes things just take as long as they take. So a lot of the time, if you break things into smaller parts and you break teams into smaller parts, they can work and swarm on those small parts and build bits and pieces, component architectures, and components that can be broken up, put back together, constructed, deconstructed, constructed. So that's why we talk about the two pizza team. Now, when people say how big that is, that's an interesting question. I have teams that run from 3 to 6, usually, sometimes 2 to 6 people. And that's enough to build something. You can then be plugged into something else. or to just deliver something in a timely manner and then come and reflect on what that is. So when you're working with software teams, always think of 2 pizza teams. No matter how many people you have, break it down into teams of 3 to 6. It's a very good rule. Sometimes you may not believe it, but try it first. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. There's another thing I talk about, and it's about failing up. And it's about the last man standing rule. So a lot of the time when you're building teams and when you're trying to find leaders on those teams, because I think you should grow leaders in teams. I don't think you always have to hire in. I think that yes, it's good to bring new people onto the team, rotate people inside your organization who want to work on new products and stuff like that. Having small teams lets you do that. But also avoid the idea of the last man standing. In Australia, we have what we call doing a Bradbury. So there was a guy called Stephen Bradbury. He was our short distance speed skater in the Winter Olympics. And that's not something that Australia is known for because we're not really about snow. But what happened was he got into the semi-finals and he was skating around the skating rink and everyone in front of him fell over. And so he just went across the line and he qualified for the finals. And everybody laughed and thought it was funny and thought, haha, Australia got into the finals. Then the finals came and the same thing happened again. So we got our first gold medal in speed skating that ever happened and will probably ever happen in the history of the Olympics. And so in Australia, instead of being like, whoa, it's such good skaters, we now call that doing a Bradbury. Don't just be the last person across the line because the first person across the line because everybody else fell over in front of you. Look for people who are doing a good job, not tenured, not just, passing some kind of bias. They're tall, they're white, they're whatever it is. Find these people who are doing good jobs. They don't have to do it loud. They don't have to be selling it to you. And look at their actual work. And they can be unproven. And especially with women, I was told recently that I wasn't qualified by a recruiter to be an architect, which is funny because I've been an architect for a decade and a half. But I don't sell myself on my resume that way. I don't say exactly the right buzzwords. So to her, I was unproven. But I would say challenge yourself to look at the unproven people and make yourself uncomfortable and make that choice. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. This is a really quick one. Ignore technology. Everyone talks about being a Java developer or JavaScript or whatever the latest flavor is. They want to do machine learning. I know I'm on a Microsoft conference right now, but I'm going to say just ignore the technology. Your company will already have a technology. Don't hire people based on that technology. Hire people who are what we call polyglot programmers, so they know multiple languages or can learn multiple languages. People who learn without fear, they're willing to try new things. And remember that technology changes. What you hire for now is going to change in the next 2 years. So hiring for a very specific skill set is just silly. Just let someone find out if they write code, talk to people who've seen them write code, look at some of their code, but don't hire them because they're the best Java developer in the world. That is not as useful as you think. And all recruitment, when you look at it, if you go online and look, is like that. So you need good technology leads to do this. Okay, so next I want to talk about, go into the next slide, sorry. I want to talk about making yourself uncomfortable. And I've broken that into a few parts that I just want to address really quickly. So you'll see my list about making yourself uncomfortable. And I don't have separate slides for this because I don't want to focus on it, but I want you to feel the discomfort when I talk about it. And one thing I say when I am coaching people on diversity hiring and building good teams is I say, I'm, as a diverse person, a member of many minorities, I'm very comfortable with being uncomfortable. Come and join me over here in my discomfort. And what that does is it pushes you. It pushes you to make choices that you wouldn't make, take risks that you wouldn't make, and say, it's okay, this is just my learning. I think if people could lean into that, that would be the biggest lesson of this decade. Just be uncomfortable and be okay with that. So what I would say is 3 things. Don't use recruiters. Use your technologists, use your product people to not just vet people, but to take them through a hiring conversation. I don't believe in tests and design sessions and things like that. I believe in talking to people, having everyone on the team talk to them, or good members of the team talk to them. And I believe in firing as well as I hire. So don't use recruiters. They are very, very weak experts in what they do, and I think they make bad judgments. And I'm basically saying this, I may never talk to another recruiter again, but I'm retired. The other thing is comfort and discomfort, which I talked about. And the other thing I really want to talk about is pay equally, not fairly. Now, that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but I say pay equally because that is objective, and paying fairly is subjective. What one person thinks is fair, another person may not think is fair, and there's always ways to justify that. So what I would say is pay equally, and check that across your companies, reconcile it over time, run algorithms across the pay systems, and make sure that people are paid the same for the same jobs they do. And that's the discomfort. I ask you those 3 things to welcome to start with, and you don't want to do that. You won't want to do those things by default, but think about them. So, I mean, that is a very distilled, reductive version of what I usually talk about. But I'm happy for anyone to reach out and talk to me and ask me more about it. And I even have recordings of the longer versions if anyone's interested. But yeah, so that's partially, mostly how I make productive software teams. Thank you very much. I'm Damana Madden. I'm Damana on every platform you can imagine because I got there first because all my friends built them. Yeah, stay in touch. Thank you very much.